Mario Saint-Supery's quest to join the list of superstar international players to suit up for Gonzaga starts this year, and boy, it's going to be a fun one to watch.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. So download the FanDuel app today. Well, folks, it is number 3 in our player preview series, talking about every player on Gonzaga's roster. We're going through their history, their best and worst case scenarios for this upcoming season, and then closing out the show, talking about their expected role, expected production, their future in Spokane, and if relevant, their NBA future. And today is a Mario party as we are talking about Gonzaga freshman guard Mario Saint-Supery. Saint-Supery is a 6'3" guard from Malaga, Spain, who joined this team earlier in the offseason. He actually did not commit to Gonzaga, and it was not finalized that he was on the roster until late June. However, it had been known for a while that Gonzaga was after Saint-Supery. They'd been pursuing him for a while. In fact, early in the transfer portal season, I believe in April, the first month that the transfer portal was open, before it had even closed, Gonzaga had been in contact with a transfer from Delaware named Isaiah Pasha. Isaiah Pasha had listed Gonzaga in his top 3, had plans to come out to Spokane and take a visit, but was told, according to sources, that Gonzaga was looking at Saint-Supery and was really not going to guarantee Isaiah Pasha a role or guarantee him even a spot necessarily, because they had their eye on somebody else that was revealed to be Mario Saint-Supery at the time. So this was like mid-April. And it was months later until he actually firmly, officially committed to Gonzaga. A little bit about who Mario was prior to his arrival on campus. He really kind of broke out on a national stage at the FIBA U18 EuroBasket event back in 2024. When he was 18 years old, of course. On that team, he averaged 21.5 points per game, or in that event, he averaged 21.5 points per game and 6.3 assists. The other people ahead of him in those categories were Ben Seraf and Nolan Traore, who were both first-round picks in this most recent NBA draft, to put a kind of a fine point on how good Mario was at that event. That's what put him on the international kind of radar for programs like Gonzaga and other college programs. And then it also got him a promotion to play for Baxi Manresa in the top level of the Spanish league, the ACB. Truly one of the best non-NBA leagues in the entire world of basketball. A very, very tough, competitive league to play in. He was playing at the top level of that league as an 18, 19-year-old, and he played 15 minutes per game for a team that finished 10th in that league in Manresa, averaged 8 points, 2 assists per game, played 33 games for them, shot 36.5% from 3, 87% from the free throw line. Again, it's always worth reiterating the age for a player like this. 8 points, 2 assists in a league like that may not jump off the page to you, but it is an incredibly difficult league. He was competing against guys on average 10 years older than him, and was one of the youngest players in the league, playing a legitimate role for a top 10 team in a high-level professional basketball league. That led to Mario, again, eventually committing to Gonzaga in late June. He only spent a couple of weeks on campus before he returned back overseas to join the Spanish men's national team. It was a 12-man roster of the best Spanish basketball players on the planet, and Mario was selected to that roster, albeit as an injury replacement, but he was still selected to that team. Spent a month out in Europe playing in various countries with this EuroBasket team. All told, he played 5 total games for Spain in EuroBasket. Spain was expected to advance farther in the tournament, but was unable to do so. So he only got to play 5 games, but in those 5 games, he played about 17 minutes per game, started one of them, averaged 8.5 points, 3 assists, and 1.5 rebounds per game. 14 assists compared to just 6 turnovers in those 5 games. He shot 53%, 8 of 15 on 2-pointers, and 33%, 5 of 15 from 3. Again, to reiterate the age part of this conversation, Mario's numbers were good for any player in that event. They were great for a 19-year-old. Mario is the youngest player, and I've probably said this fact 15 times on the podcast. So if you are an everyday listener, you almost certainly know what I am about to say. Mario, the youngest player to play for Spain at a EuroBasket event since Ricky Rubio, who did so as an 18-year-old back in 2009. And if you are somebody a little younger, on the younger side, maybe a current Gonzaga student, and you know Ricky Rubio primarily from his NBA career or primarily from the last half of his NBA career, that may not sound that impressive to you. But let me tell you, Ricky Rubio, as an international basketball player, was an absolute icon. He will likely be in the Hall of Fame someday. And I'm not going to go on a tangent about how people don't understand that it's the Basketball Hall of Fame and not the NBA Hall of Fame. And they'll be like, well, Ricky Rubio's NBA stats weren't good enough, blah, blah, blah. Another conversation for another time. Regardless, Mario being anywhere close to the stratosphere of Ricky Rubio is an extraordinary accomplishment and a sign of how well respected and revered he is already as a teenager in Spanish basketball. A huge coup for Gonzaga to bring this young man to campus to be a part of the team for this upcoming season. We've only seen snippets of Mario in a Gonzaga uniform, notably his debut coming at Craziness in the Kennel last Saturday. Mario participated in a 3-point shootout, finished 3rd out of 4 in the inaugural round. Steel Venters and Adam Miller both beat him and advanced to the championship where Steel Venters won. Mario did score 13 points, which was 2 more points than scored by Braeden Huff, who had 11 in that event. Now, Mario didn't do all that well in the scrimmage. If you're box score surfing, you're going to raise your eyebrows very heavily at Mario's performance during the scrimmage. He played 17 out of 20 minutes in the event, had just 2 points, 3 assists, 2 rebounds, shot 1 of 4 from the field, including missing both of his 3-point attempts, and he had 5 turnovers. It wasn't a great showing from Mario. I think the performance on the floor did not look as bad as the stat line looks, and I mentioned this in the recap on Monday of Craziness overall, that a lot of it was just miscommunication with teammates, notably miscommunication with Tyon Grant-Foster, who is the only player on Gonzaga's roster who has spent less time around the team than Mario. There was a play where Mario was driving and he kicked it out to the 3-point line where he thought Tyon Grant-Foster was, but Grant-Foster had started to cut towards the basket and the pass just went out of bounds. That's a turnover on Mario. And I don't even really know whose fault it was, for lack of a better word, because I don't know if there was a set play, if Tyon was supposed to stay in the corner, if it was just free balling it and just playing basketball on their own, what the situation was. But those are the kind of things that are going to get cleaned up as you get more used to your teammates. Like, I'm not concerned about that, nor do I think anybody should be overly concerned about that. I liked his effort on defense. He tried to get a little cute with some passes, but this is a scrimmage game for the fans, so I'm not super worried about that either. Obviously, if he's trying to do stuff like that in games, Mark Few will take care of that very quickly. He tends to make sure that players aren't doing anything that he doesn't like them to do in the showboating variety. So I don't think that that's something I would concern myself with much either. The main question for Mario is pretty simple. Is he ready? And I think that's so much of the determining factor for this team's ceiling overall this season, as well as for Mario's floor and ceiling as a player in year one. And that's what I want to talk about. Moving on to the second segment, what are the best and worst case scenarios for Mario? Could he start right away? Is it going to take him an entire year to adjust to playing college basketball? Those are kind of the tent poles for this situation. We're going to break it down more specifically coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, when the opening whistle blows on a new repair, you get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow, including over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. And if you need parts fast for a project, Supply House has next-day delivery. Talk about a game changer. The Part Finder tools and 3D schematics can save you hours on jobs where every single detail matters. And their Trademaster perks, like priority shipping and dedicated support, make this whole process even smoother. So join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and you'll get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. And when you use FanDuel, whether it's parlays, player props, or even jumping in on the action live, it makes watching football even more exciting since you've got a little bit riding on that action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. Zags remain at plus 3,500 to take home Mark Few's first national championship in 2026. If you like those odds, check it out. Visit FanDuel.com now to download the FanDuel app today and get started. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we're still rolling through our Mario party here on Locked On Zags, our Mario Saint-Supery season preview episode. Now we're going to talk best case and worst case scenarios for Mario. And again, I will give this caveat here. The best case is within reason. The worst case is without injury, meaning if your best case scenario is truly that you win the Wooden Award and are the first overall pick in the 2026 NBA draft, then great. We will say that. But that's not realistic for most players. So we're going to keep it within the realm of what I'm considering realistic for these players. Worst case scenario for every player is that they get hurt and miss the season. Unless injuries are a relevant part of a player's background, i.e. steel venters, we're not going to discuss them here because it's just not really good or interesting analysis. For Mario Saint-Supery, the best case scenario, and again, I think another caveat, we are talking about the best case scenario for the players. In some cases, it may not be the best case scenario for the team. For Mario, the best case scenario is that he starts immediately. In fact, a recent article from ESPN, Jeff Borzello, fantastic college basketball writer, he did his preseason top 25. He had Gonzaga 20th in the top 25, and he did his projected starting 5, and it included Mario starting over Braeden Smith at point guard. I don't think that's super likely. We'll get more into that in the third segment, but the best case scenario for Mario is that he is starting on day one, whether that's in place of Braeden Smith, whether that's in place of projected starter Adam Miller at the 2. Either way, the best case scenario is that Mark Few and the staff believe Mario is ready to play starter level minutes on day one of the 25-26 college basketball season. The best case scenario for Mario Saint-Supery is that he is the best international player in college basketball this upcoming season, that he is better than former Gonzaga target Neo Abdelas, who went to Virginia Tech, that he is better than 22-year-old starting small forward Luka Bogovac at North Carolina, or Dame Sarr at Duke, or so on and so forth. The list of powerful, talented international players in college hoops this year is numerous. And the best case scenario for Mario is that he is the best and most prolific of those international newcomers across this entire sport. How that happens. For Mario, he immediately proves that he can play both point guard and shooting guard in Gonzaga's offense. It is clear that he is truly a combo guard and is ready to contribute, whether he's the one initiating the offense with the ball in his hands, navigating pick and rolls, getting the team into their offense, or whether he's playing off the ball, helping to run the motion offense, serving as a secondary creator or a spot-up shooter. Either way, he is comfortable and familiar with the role that he is being asked to do, and that starts right out of the chutes in less than a month. The best case scenario for Mario Saint-Supery is that he is an electric distributor and facilitator, that he is lethal in the pick and roll, that he looks like Ryan Nembhard at point guard. He navigates screens. He makes the right reads off the screens. He can distribute the ball to Graham or Braeden or whomever is setting a screen for him. He makes the right reads in terms of knowing when to drive towards the basket. He's strong enough to finish through contact to get to the free throw line. He demonstrates a keen awareness of what he needs to do with the basketball. He makes passes where the entire student section didn't know where the ball was until Graham or Braeden caught it. And it was just like, where did that come from? How did that happen? He's doing that on a regular basis. The The best case scenario for Mario Saint-Supery is that his outside shooting is better than advertised. Right now, he's kind of projected as a more theoretical outside shooter. Like, oh, he's not going to be bad, but we're not sure he's going to be great either. I think a lot of places would project him to be like 35%, somewhere in there, which is kind of what he shot in his last couple of professional starts. But in a best case scenario, he is better than that. And Gonzaga's spacing allows him to get, and the gravity that Graham and Braeden take up in the front court allows him to get a lot of open looks. And he's banging threes at a 40% clip, and just an all around offensive nightmare for opposing teams to deal with. The best case scenario for Mario Saint-Supery is that he is a hellraiser in transition, that his ball handling skills, his floor vision, and Gonzaga's go offensive mentality means that he is constantly getting out in transition. Instead of thinking Ryan Nembhard, let's think Andrew Nembhard, getting that ball, looking up, immediately making passes down the floor, allowing Gonzaga to run and wear teams down throughout the season. The best case scenario for Mario Saint-Supery is that he is an above average defender who can guard at the point of attack and can get out on shooters and help Gonzaga with his length and his size on the perimeter, preventing Gonzaga from giving up three-point shot after three-point shot after three-point shot like they did last year, particularly in those games in that first game in particular against Santa Clara. Mario's length, his intelligence, translates to him being an immediately impactful player defensively for Mark Few's team. The best case scenario for Mario Saint-Supery is that he is on the All-WCC first team as a freshman, that he is the freshman/newcomer of the year in the West Coast Conference, and that unfortunately, again, as we're talking about the best case for Mario, the end of the season feels like very likely the end of Mario's tenure at Gonzaga. The odds of him becoming a one-and-done player go from, at this point, it's not really clear, maybe like 40% to, oh, he's gone. That is the best case scenario for Mario. Not necessarily the best case scenario for Gonzaga. They would love to have him for at least 2 years, probably more than that if they could. But the best case scenario for Mario is that by December, he is consistently on every single mock draft, and that does not change until the draft actually happens 6 months later. What are the worst case scenarios for Mario Saint-Supery? Well, again, so much of this year is going to be him developing and getting better and doing things that are going to happen behind the scenes. So a lot of it we wouldn't necessarily know. A lot of things that may seem negative on the surface won't be viewed negatively if he blossoms in year 2 or even in year 3. But the worst case scenario for Mario Saint-Supery is that the number of games that look kind of like what we saw at Craziness is a little higher than we'd like to admit. Again, he played 17 minutes at Craziness. I think that's a pretty reasonable projection for how many minutes he might play over the course of a full game on average. Now, obviously, there's a difference between playing 17 out of 20 minutes versus 17 out of 40 minutes. But for Mario, games where he only scores a couple of points, where he has more turnovers than assists, like the worst case scenario is that you see that fairly often. And that's not that unusual for freshmen. That's not that unusual for international players in Gonzaga system. The number of international players who have been rock solid contributors on day one as freshmen is pretty slim. Shemet Karnowski didn't play much as a freshman. Domantas Sabonis is one of the few who did. Killian Tilly had a small role. Ronny Turiaf didn't play as much. Like, the list goes on and on. You look at other international guards. I mean, it's hard to count the Nembhards because they were they didn't start their college career at Gonzaga. Kevin Pangos is a notable counterexample. But for the most part, international players don't blossom at Gonzaga until year 2 or 3. And so the worst case for Mario is just that he joins a list of very, very good other international players who took a year or two to find themselves in a Gonzaga uniform. The worst case scenario for Mario really is that he's not ready to play point guard. And that the time that he was not on campus because he was at EuroBasket, because he did not sign until late June, prevent him from being ready to take on the on-ball role at Gonzaga. And the majority of the minutes that he plays end up being off the ball. He ends up serving primarily as Adam Miller's backup at the 2, and it puts a little bit more pressure on Worley and potentially Miller himself to play more point guard whenever Braeden Smith is not on the floor. The worst case scenario for Mario Saint-Supery is that he's just turning the ball over too much, that the processing is a little slower than anticipated. The differences between European basketball and college basketball are taking him longer to adjust to than maybe we would have anticipated at this point. The worst case scenario for Mario is that he struggles in the pick and roll. He's not able to get downhill and score consistently at the rim. And again, ends up being relegated to playing more off the ball as a secondary creator, as somebody who does most of his damage in transition, but he's not really impacting the game in the half court sets as much as we'd like. The worst case scenario for Mario Saint-Supery is that he is lost on defense, that he gets schemed against by good teams, because he's struggling to navigate pick and rolls defensively. He's struggling to understand what is asked of him in Gonzaga's sets, and he is a liability on the floor to the point where he cannot play against good teams, against more physical teams, in close games, because he's not contributing defensively. The worst case scenario for Mario is that his outside shot is not there, but that he keeps looking for it. I don't really care if Mario shoots under 33% if it's on a low volume. But if he's hacking up a lot of threes and he's not knocking them down, that becomes a problem for Gonzaga. And then the worst case scenario, again, if he's developing behind the scenes and gradually getting better throughout the year, even if he starts at a lower point than we want him to, if he's getting better throughout the year, this isn't that bad of a scenario. It may end up being the worst case scenario for Mario, but that's not necessarily a bad thing for Gonzaga. Nobody would have called Shemet Karnowski's first year at Gonzaga good necessarily, but look what happened to him after a couple of years of development. And the worst case scenario for Mario is that he's very clearly back for year two. He's not going to the NBA. His draft stock has quote unquote plummeted because he did not play enough or well enough to garner a spot in the NBA draft in 2026, but that he's coming back. Maybe the excitement's a little dimmed. Maybe people aren't as ready for like the Mario Party sophomore breakout is maybe more skepticism from the fan base about it than there would have been at this time a year ago, but that he's still coming back and that you're still like, okay, maybe the development is there. Maybe he's going to pop in year two, but it's not as much of a sure thing in the worst case scenario. So what is the most likely outcome for Mario in his first season? And when, not if, when will the NBA come calling? We're going to talk about that to close out the show coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS top safety pick awards than anyone else. From footwork to breathwork, athletes, they're sweating all the details. And Mazda brings that same intention to how they craft every make and model. And you can feel that incredible Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Nappa leather upholstery. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Because with Mazda, everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. And like Zag players, Mazda sweats every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. One of the tools that helps make a huge difference for business owners is Quo, formerly Open Phone. It's the same great business phone system that you've heard me talk about before, just with a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed call is money left on the table. With every customer conversation counts, you need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7. And Quo is the #1 business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app on your phone or computer, so no more carrying two phones or relying on a landline. Their built-in AI agent is a game changer. It can answer after-hours calls, capture leads, and keep businesses moving even when you're off the clock. See why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly Open Phone. Get started for free and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedoncollege. That's QUO.com/lockedoncollege. And if you've got existing numbers with another service, Quo will port them over at no charge. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we're closing out the show, continuing our conversation about new point guard Mario Saint-Supery and what he's bringing to Gonzaga in his first year. We talked about his history, his performance this summer at EuroBasket with Spain. We talked about his best and worst case scenarios for this upcoming season. Now we're going to close out the show talking about what I think is his most realistic role, realistic output and production as a freshman, and what that might mean for his future in Spokane and his future as a professional basketball player. First off, I want to say I disagree with the great Jeff Borzello at ESPN. I do not think that Mario is going to start in year one for Gonzaga, at least not on opening day. I suppose it's possible down the line he ends up taking a starting role. I would not be shocked if that happened, but I'd be pretty darn surprised if he started on day one. for a handful of reasons. One, the limited amount of time that he has spent on campus this summer just does not feel conducive to him starting. It's part of the reason I'm leaning more towards Steele Venters starting in place of Ty Grant Foster, even if Grant Foster gets his waiver approved, just because he hasn't been on campus for very long. And Mark Few likes to reward veterans. Steele Venters, despite having played the same number of games in a Gonzaga uniform as Ty Grant Foster, is a veteran because he has been on this team for 2 years. Likewise, Braeden Smith, who has also played the same number of games as everybody else, is a veteran in the sense that he was here last year. I believe Mark Few will reward that. And I believe Braeden is more ready to play the starting point guard role, even if Mario's upside is higher, even if Mario's overall talent level may be higher than Braeden Smith's. Braeden Smith is more ready to contribute right now. And I would be very surprised if Mario started over him or Adam Miller to begin the season. But I do think Mario plays a big role for this team. And I think it's a role that grows throughout the year. I think early on in the season, he's probably playing. Again, some of this does depend on Ty Grant Foster's situation. I've been trying to avoid doing these player previews for players that are going to be impacted dramatically by Grant Foster because we don't know what his status is yet for the upcoming season as of this recording. But for Mario, I think he's going to play probably 7th, 8th most minutes on the team, again, depending on Grant Foster's status. I think he ends up playing maybe 10 to 15 minutes per game early in the year. And then as the year goes on, he ends up playing closer to 15, 20 minutes per game. I could see a reality where he cuts significantly into Adam Miller or Steele Venters or Grant Foster or even Smith's playing time, depending on how he's doing and depending on how the season is going. But I think it's going to still ultimately end up being a role that's more like 16, 17 minutes per game, which is about what he averaged at EuroBasket and about what he averaged last year at Baxi Manresa. So not a huge jump for him in terms of production from his previous stops. I would expect a mix of dud games, like the craziness performance where he had 5 turnovers and 2 assists. Like, you're not going to see a ton of those, but you're going to see some of those. Like, I think we're going to see some games where it's like, oh, what happened? Like, Mario just never really found it. And I don't even know if he'll get enough playing time to get a 5 turnover game, simply because if he starts struggling and he's not making reads correctly and whatever, whether it's, Mick Cronin or Randy Bennett or whoever they're playing is scheming him and he's struggling to interpret it, he's struggling to process, Mark Few's just going to yank him. Like, he's not going to let him die on the vine out there because they have so much depth in the guard room. They don't need him to. And Mark Few has always been very good at balancing. I need this player to develop and I need them to not lose confidence, but I also cannot let them, we're not a rebuilding team. They've never been a rebuilding team. And so you can't let a guy out there just continue to struggle and make mistakes in the name of like, oh, it'll help him get better next year. That's never been Gonzaga's style. And yet their players still develop at an extremely high clip. So Mark Few's not going to let Mario die out there in those rough performances, but they're still going to happen. And he's still going to have games where it's like, oh, he only played 8 minutes today because he struggled in his first 4 minutes on the floor and just didn't really get another chance. But he's also going to have games where we are just full on celebrating afterwards, where everybody's deliriously happy because Mario made 3 passes that just mystified everybody in the crowd. And he banged open threes and he just did all sorts of stuff that makes you think this guy might be the most talented player on this team. I think he's going to have a mix of both those things. I don't think that's a particularly bold statement to make about a freshman with his talent level, but I do think that that is a healthy thing to acknowledge and be prepared for as a fan base, that those bad games do not mean that Mario is a bust, and those great games do not mean that he's going to be a lottery pick. It just means that he's a very talented player who's still finding his spot in this system, especially with a limited amount of time to prepare for the season and get used to his new surroundings, his new teammates, his new scheme, his new entire league that he's playing in. I think Mario will ultimately end up being a guy who's maybe 6-7 points per game, 3-ish assists per game, 35%-ish from 3, to put some numbers on a projection there. But again, I think it's going to be a few performances where he has 15 points off the bench, a few performances where he just doesn't score at all in 6 minutes. I also think he ends up being a candidate for the newcomer / freshman of the year. I think for Thierry Darlan at Santa Clara is not going to be considered a freshman because he's only got 2 years of eligibility despite being a first-year player in college basketball. But I think he's going to be like a strong candidate for that award. If it's newcomer of the year, there's other transfers that are going to be in the mix as well. But I think Mario will be in that conversation for sure. I think ultimately, and this is the best case scenario for Gonzaga, so maybe I'm just trying to manifest what I think is their best case scenario. I don't think Mario ends up being one and done. I don't think he's going to play enough, and I think he's going to have enough growing pains this year that it won't be the smart decision for him to go to the NBA. Again, we are in an era now where if you are not a guaranteed first-round pick, many of those players are choosing to come back to college basketball, like LeBaron Philon at Alabama, like Tahad Pettifer at Auburn, like Alex Condon at Florida, and on and on and on. There are many others who chose to come back to college because they can make more money playing college basketball than they would on a non-guaranteed two-way contract at the NBA level. I don't think Mario will play well enough to be a lockdown, guaranteed first-round pick. And I think because of that, he will opt to return to school for his sophomore year. But I think he will play well enough as a freshman that return to college is something we are thrilled about. And with the assumption being that Braeden Smith will be a 2-year player at Gonzaga, but of course, Adam Miller will be out of eligibility. Tyon Grant Foster will be out of eligibility. I think the odds are that Mario will return for his sophomore year. And in the 26-27 season, Gonzaga's first year in the Pac-12, Gonzaga's starting backcourt will be the elite 2-point guard lineup that Mark Few craves and loves. In this case, it'll be Smith and Saint-Supery starting together, 2 ball handlers, 2 creators, 2 pick and roll wizards starting together for Gonzaga. I think that is what will happen in the 26-27 season. And regarding Mario's NBA future, I think he spends 2 years at Gonzaga. I think the most likely scenario is that Gonzaga's second year in the Pac-12, they are needing a fully new backcourt because Braeden Smith will be out of eligibility and Mario Saint-Supery will be a first-round pick in the NBA draft. I think that he will spend 2 great years at Gonzaga. Year 1 will have some growing pains, some ups and downs this upcoming season. Year 2, he will blossom into a star. If the roster holds, year 2 for Mario will also be Braden Huff's senior year, Braeden Smith's senior year. I think that team could be outstanding as they enter the Pac-12 for the first time. Mario is a very, very obvious NBA draft prospect. He has the requisite size to be a modern point guard in the NBA. If he shows the outside shot at all, his experience against high-level athletes dating back to his time in Spain, his ability to navigate the pick and roll, the defense, if those things look good, he will be a player who is in the NBA before too long. I'm not saying it's impossible that he's a 3-year guy or even a 4-year guy at Gonzaga. If he ends up being, if you told me right now that Mario is going to be a 4-year guy at Gonzaga, I would assume that is because he is not as good as advertised. I would not treat that as a good thing. I would treat that as like was this a bit of a miss by Gonzaga? Because if he's as good as we think he's going to be, he's not going to be here for 4 years. It's not going to happen. I think the most likely scenario and the best case scenario for Gonzaga, quite frankly, is that he's here for 2 years, but he's really, really awesome for 1.5 of those years. That's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making this show your first listen and your first watch of the day and joining me on this Mario party here on Thursday. We'll be back with one more show to close out the week. And then next week, we've got a couple more of these player previews. And then we're going to have a game preview next week as we get ready for Gonzaga's exhibition opener against Northwest University on Sunday, October 19th. I cannot wait. Real Gonzaga basketball just around the corner. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And of course, as always, go Zags.